Hello, Zoomies. Any questions for anyone? Please? I beg of you. One of the stories from the monastery is Sunday, Sirimado. Venerable Sirimado was walking alms round down Black Lake Road, and Anne and Eilish, who are tuning in, offer Pindapad alms round every Saturday morning. So apparently they said they offered Pindapad and had to rush back to the Zoom meeting. And then, so they were at separate locations, and then so Anne did that, and then Eilish did that, and Venerable Sirimado said, well, that's the modern world. They're here, they're there, they're everywhere. Well, it was kind of nice. Does anyone have any burning questions or smoldering questions or cold questions? Or do you? Yes, Jane.
Well, not really, but yesterday you said something at one point, I think, or one day you said that peace can get boring.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would say it gets boring because of the tendencies of craving. So the tendencies of craving are interested in objects. And so even though you touch the silence, which is independent of the need for objective experiences in that way, the whole habit of going outward is quite strong. So that's why it's kind of ironic. You kind of searching for peace, and the mind starts to settle, and then the habit, quite often it's just thinking or doubt or dullness. Dullness comes, yeah.
I thought it meant like what you aim for isn't ever what you want anyway. Or
That, I mean, there's that too. Yeah, that's a truth. But I think, like I certainly, as a young monk, I had no idea what I was getting into, of course. And I had no idea that it's at least one lifetime's work. At least. and I mean, I had no concept of this as anything other than the present moment. So I had no idea I'm gonna stay for like a lifetime or stay for two. It wasn't part of the way I looked at monasticism. I just figured that, well, as long as I'm not really free and liberated from suffering, this is the best way to handle it. And I'm still working. It's getting better. So, anyone? Alan, right? Or Dave? Dave, sorry. Close.
Two questions.
Mm-hmm, please, yeah.
The first is, how often do you find yourself thinking and, with 20 minutes to go, oh my God, there's 20 minutes left to go.
That comes if there's pain.
Okay.
Yeah. So it kind of depends when the pain arises. But I know it enough that if the pain isn't going to cause me to limp for the next hour, that it is discomfort rather than pain which is injurious, then I use that discomfort to try to let go of the resistance to the unpleasant. So as the pain arises biologically, the system says you better move. Through experience, I can witness that and say, yeah, that's a bad one. Let's move. Or, yeah, I've seen this 100 times. Let's see what goes on. So, yeah, normally I can use that to heighten attention and settle the mind with the body. But, maybe there's something quite not exciting, but agitating going on in the monastery. So maybe my mind has other another background going on because something, and then the body, mind might feel restless because of that. But generally, tuning in to a body which has a kind of firmness in the posture, but has a deep sense of not grasping is a very, very good tool for that. And so when discomfort arises, but for me it doesn't arise just because of the time span. Like it used to arise before, but now I have enough experience that this time span is actually nice. It's quite nice that way. First one. Second one, or
I didn't expect such a long answer when I said I wanted to ask two, so I don't want to.
no, it's okay. I need questions.
Okay.
Please help me.
At your service. So, I'm very curious in the terms, Buddha, Arhat, Bodhisattva, Bhikkhu. They get, particularly the first three, right? I'm interested. Who qualifies?
Who?
Do you know?
Who?
Have you met people that you would consider to be Buddhas or Arhants or and what do you consider yourself?
Good enough. But taking that aside, like in Theravada, well, first of all, those words. Buddha is used differently in Tibetan Buddhism, in Chinese Mahayana, like in Pure Land it's used differently, and Theravada it's used differently. So you'd think that word at least would be used the same way, but it's used in different ways. And not just as like, what was the year of birth, not in that kind of functional sense, but actually as a philosophical principle. So I can't speak to the Tibetan use of the word, so to the Theravada use of the word is it's a particular being that's born into the world when there is no teaching of liberation, and that teacher is self-realized. So in a sense there's no need for another Buddha right now because there's teaching available. So we wouldn't say of an enlightened person that they're a Buddha. We might say, oh, it's just like a Buddha, but it wouldn't be like a doctrinal position. Arahant is one that there's many ways to define that, but it's one who's realized the full cessation of craving, the abandonment of all the fetters, the relinquishment of all substrata of self. So there's different ways that's talked about, but in Theravada also, it's kind of verboten to talk about your own attainments. And Ajahn Chah was very strict with that because he didn't want people pointing at him. He said, it's not about me, although he would allude to certain experiences he had. But Theravada's been, at least the forest tradition, we've been very diligent, I think, in guarding against the tendency to create heroic images because of their attainments. So we tend to, the heroic images are more because of their true presence, their teaching, actually how they're living their lives, not because of, and that's a very strong, like we have a rule that if I were to declare myself to have some supramundane attainment, which I didn't have, and I lied to you, then once I had lied to you in that context, I would no longer be a monk. It's called a parajika offense. It's one of the 4 major offenses. And so there's a kind of a huge caution around declaring attainment. Not that monks don't do that or might do that. So have I met an arahant? I don't know. But I've met beings who, I want some of that, that kind of feeling. And that's all I can say because, once I say that I know something, then it assumes that I also have some attainment and so on. So you'll find the language around that is, we're very cautious about, talking in those ways. And most teachers are just, point back to you. You see, yeah, well, there are enlightened beings. Are you enlightened? That kind of thing. So maybe the more general question of like faith and optimism is, are there enlightened beings in this world? Are there beings who are fully realized? Is their teaching available? And I certainly feel that. And there is a kind of bias sometimes you'll find in some of the Theravada home countries that enlightenment is no longer possible. It was just for the good old days. My teachers never agreed to that. And then that's a very dangerous way to go, because then the teaching is just a ritual for better rebirth. And so there's a lot that goes on there. Bodhisattva is a word that's used differently in Theravada that it used in like Tibetan or Mahayana, and I can't speak, it's very different, So in the Theravada tradition, we use the Pali language, and Bodhisattva is the Sanskrit word, Bodhisatta, TTA, is the Pali word, and a Bodhisatta is the lives of the Buddha before enlightenment. So we don't have the idea of bodhisattvas functioning in like Kuan Yin or these kinds of ideas. So Theravada's a pretty minimalist kind of. They don't have a whole iconography around bodhisattvas, and so I've never even, like Ajahn Chah, I didn't ask him what his attainments were, because I mean he would laugh at me. Right, and I realized it's not a polite question. It would be like how much do you make? You make what? And you make, and how much? It would be like it's not de rigueur in good circles, and that's and so always in Theravada it's like, well, whatever, if the teachings work, use them. If not, don't worry about it. It's always been that kind of reflection. And that I, you like if you go to India, you can see how, you go to Thailand, any country, where some teachers will profess all kinds of attainment, and because the culture has a great faith in that, they'll make a lot of money. You can really is it crowdfunding? He's making some serious cash. So in the first edition of the Ajahn Chah lineage, say we have publications. We have publication guidelines for any books that are published in our tradition, and one of them is that whoever the author is of the book, we can't put his picture on the cover. We can only have a small picture on the back with a small bio. So we're quite careful about that. So say in India you read about some of these fabulous gurus, that have millions of followers, but then also you like I was in Tiruvannamalai last year in South India, and there was a woman, Gangachi, I think. Yeah, Gangachi is her name. I think there are many Gangachis in India, but and I just went to a satsang where there were like, how many? 100 people in a room. Yeah, it was a room this size, packed with people, and satsang is, sitting with the wisdom of the guru, say, and it was just all in silence. We were just sitting there. And that's also a part of the Indian tradition of just sitting in silence with a teacher. And then within that silent context, people can ask questions. So, after about 40 minutes of silence, people sitting there, she's sitting there, someone asked, it was, I think, an American voice, said, well, I'm a psychologist, and I'm wondering, how does the world look from your side? And she just looked at him. I think she gave him the insect look. She wasn't going there, right? She wasn't going there. But when the question reverted to another person's practice, then she was quite compassionate and answered. Yeah. So did I not answer that, or kind of, I give you
Yeah, no, that's great.
Theravada perspective, yeah. I don't know of anyone of my peers who have made any kind of statements like that. Maybe one. It's interesting, as soon as, like in our sensitivities as monastics, when a monastic starts to make claims, we're all saying, wait. You're just a monk, man. So we kind of, because we've been at it long enough that we're not going to, if there's some BS in the air, we're going to say, well, you're, and it's actually interesting for a teacher in this situation. I have people will praise me, and there'll be all kinds of projections and so on and so forth. But then when I go back to the monastery, although I'm respected, I'm still only a monk. And it's so healthy that it's just so good because people say you're great, you might even think it. Which is very dangerous. And then you go back, oh yeah, you're one of this community, you were special but not special or whatever. So we're very fortunate that we have a way of teachers developing teaching skills, but not being so vulnerable to these forces of praise and all that can go on. Yeah, we're quite fortunate that way. All right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry if I committed a faux pas by even asking.
No. I mean, this is the way we educate our system. I mean, no, people would ask Luang Por all the time, but they'd ask him more for lottery numbers. I mean, that was what's really important. So yeah, they say to him like, Luang Por, how old are you? He said, older than last year. And how many monks are in the monastery this year? Quite a few. And then there's a great story. So all the time, lay people are coming asking for lottery numbers. This is quite common. And then Luang Por Chah died on the 16th of January. There were 8 or 16, I think 8 pillars in his in the stupa where his ashes are interred. So 8 and 16 were the numbers spinning around among the bookies who were taking side bets. And 8 and 16 won. So and that came out like the day of the funeral. So there's a funeral. There's like 500,000 people. The King of Thailand, the Queen of Thailand, the Prime Minister, the head of the Army, the head of the Navy, the head of the Air Force, the head of the Marines, all the governors. I mean, it was a national funeral. It's just amazing kind of thing. And so first of all, the bookies had to leave town because they didn't have the money to cover this. But then Ajahn Jaya's sorrow is then he was very much involved with the funeral, or central. He's an English monk of a great renown. He just wanted to do some walkabout, so he just with the small requisites that he has as monks, we can live very simply in Thailand. He just headed off on the railway tracks out of Ubon town, and he said that as he's walking along, the villagers would, because they knew he was an Ajahn Chah monk they said, he finally gave us the number, Ajahn Chah, great monk. It's a true story. Any other questions? Shall we meditate then, yeah? Let's sit for whatever time we sit.